Hello, I'm Dr. Garret Castleberry, Associate Professor of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. I also serve as the Chair of the Adult School of Arts and Sciences. I'm here to present on the Intersections, Divides, and Interpretations panel hosted by the Media Ecology Division for the National Communication Association. We're also chaired by Julia Hildebrand, and I would just like to thank you all, our chair, the reviewers, respondents in the Media Ecology Division, and of course a fantastic group of panelists on our Intersections, Divides, and Interpretations discourse. And I look forward to asynchronously enjoying each of your presentations. A lot of topics that have some connectability and synergy, and hopefully I'll be able to speak on behalf of the ideas that my presentation is based on and kind of cultivate some interest there, with the potential for some follow-up in the future. The title of my presentation is The Persuasive Power of Genre as a Universal Narrative Language. And to provide a little bit of context for this, the submission that I'm presenting on is a version of what would become a work included in an upcoming book, Innovations and Implications of Persuasive Narrative, edited by Stephanie Schartel Dunn and Gwendelyn Nisbett. And that's an exciting work coming out at the tail end of this year from Peter Lang. So you can be on the lookout. What I'm going to attempt to do is talk about some of the ideas that I'm working through and kind of build a conversation about and around genre as something we should give strong consideration for within the wide field of communication. But specifically, what a wonderful home to support these ideas with the Media Ecology Group, and I'm excited to talk about that. All right, and so allow me to sort of set up and unpack the argument that I make in this paper. And my goal will be to, because we're in an asynchronous fashion, I want to create an atmosphere that's as conversational as possible. So I will try my best to provide an extemporaneous summary of those results, so that we are able to kind of overcome those digital barriers as much as possible. All right. In formulating the crux of this essay, I'm drawing from a background that is combining some subdisciplinary, maybe cross-disciplinary areas. I'm very interested in media studies. I'm very interested in narrative and narrative theory, and media studies, not only in terms of mass communication, but also in some of these tertiary interest groups like film studies, television, and so on. And I can liken those interests and kind of make a case for connecting the tissue between these areas, because our department specializes in seeking out and helping students with their scholarly and professional development in an interdisciplinary fashion. So you're in for the kind of talk that advocates interdisciplinarity and the spirit of that. This essay is drawing from some early ideas looking at media history and genre theory, and kind of conceptualizing why they're important and why they're valuable now, and essential 21st century theoretical terms worthy of our consideration and potential pedagogical adoption in the classroom. When we talk about media studies, there is, of course, McLuhan. I know he's a circular favorite in the media ecology division, but I'm drawn to not merely his more publicly appreciated sayings, but the conceptualization of the global village. And we understand that, especially right now, we're existing in a kind of multimodal series of silos, right? Where people can run off to their respective algorithms for that confirmation bias that they seek, right? It's the proverbial pill button that we're all punching. But I also appreciate this idea of the global village as that epic, or maybe epoch, fire that we're sitting around telling stories, passing culture down. But it's transmitted globally, and technology has filled that gap for us. And along the way, there were camps that would contend that English was emerging as that dominant primary language on a global scale, and this received some momentum, right, and support as the internet grew in those infancy stages, right. That first kind of 15 years of massive development. But really, we have seen the kind of diversification of language usage online. We can't necessarily claim total hegemony in terms of the variability of English. However, one area that we can look at as dominant, as a dominant mode of communication, is technology, and in particular, popular media. And this is where it might be apropos to thus make a case that popular media is the prism that could enable communication scholars to cross the threshold. Certainly scholars have been writing about this for years and continue to. It's why those types of low theory fields, and I'm saying that tongue in cheek, of course, are gaining momentum, because they cross bridges in ways that perhaps some of the high theory simply cannot. And so the argument that I'm extending in this essay comes from a place of recognizing popular media, as opposed to English, as an emergent and dominating global language. All right. And when we talk about popular media, we can look at something like the entertainment industry specifically. And within the entertainment industry, we have media industries, right? Of course, there's the argumentative fallacy of lumping them all together. But we do so for the sake of discourse. The media industry largely is organized, I argue, around rules of genre. And if we take a closer look at how information is produced and distributed, we will see the rules of genre at work and at play, even in ways that are culturally and commercially viable. All right. And so when we think about the rules of genre, a couple of key texts come to mind. Rick Altman's film genre was a key text that I kept reflecting on and revisiting as I was putting this essay together. His book is in theory, right, largely about film and the film industry. But I think what makes it such a lasting text, right, originally composed in 1999, I think it's a BFI collection, although his essays were scattered across several journals in the years preceding that. Altman's film genre is a lesson in genre theory, but he also has a kind of underbelly argument going on where he's demonstrating time and again that really there are the rules of genre that extend in multiple directions. Maybe a helpful way to think about the multiple directions these rules extend would be to look at, just for example, the way that Amanda Lotz and Jonathan Gray theorize about television studies. In their book, Television Studies, they advocate that researchers of television, scholars of television, should no longer centralize or maybe prioritize the text, right, as a sole unit of analysis. And that's a counter critique coming out of the history of literary criticism, in which we have the text divorced for some scholars from perhaps context, or even as we've read, the author's intent, as Bart might tell us. And so Lotz and Gray, they kind of centralize four tiers or tenets of performing television studies type work, and they advocate examining not only the text but also its context, which has a flavor that recalls rhetoric and rhetorical criticism, right? Anytime we're looking at the context, whether it is the author's intent or the cultural situation in which a message is produced. And so the text, the context, as well as the institutions that produce the text, and the audience or audiences that receive the text, right? That decode it, as Stuart Hall might tell us. And so I think when we think about television studies and those four tiers, that's but one of many examples in which we can see how veritable something like genre can be, the rules of genre, the tenets of genre, when we open it up to explore maybe not only mass media, right, the media ecologies that exist, but also communication and our various silos of intellectual curiosity and rich civil discourse. But I'm also interested in describing genre in this essay. And so here are a couple of descriptive elements, ways we can consider the potency of genre, right? As a universal narrative language, as a persuasive tool of communication. I would suggest that genre is communicatively potent, first and foremost, and we can look at that whether we're looking at surface level understandings of genre, right? Maybe like a programming genre that is able to capture an element of a market and thus dominate its presence in that market. It's communicatively potent because its symbols and symbol systems resonate with its audience once it creates market penetration. Genre is also economically viable. We understand this now. And whether we're talking about genres of entertainment, that was the lead-in way that I began this discussion, or perhaps genres of business and commerce, maybe even politics, we can see how economically valuable this term can be, and thus serves for scholarly interest heading into the future. I would contend that genre is increasingly globally relevant, and in an age where we're seeing multinational conglomerate mergers and co-financed productions of varying sorts, rules of genre are playing, have something to say within the context of the product, but also within the context of the relationship between groups and regions. Genre is also continuously malleable, but also concrete. And that's where we get into the interesting sub-conversation about defining genre, understanding the basic formula of genre studies. And a basic maybe rules or tenets of genre is that any given genre is going to have a combination of imitation and innovation, convention and invention. Perhaps as Will Wright observed among some of the other scholars, the rules of genre are deceptively simple. One might be examining the foreign versus the familiar, something that other scholars would be relevant to. But also an example that comes to mind is Kendall Phillips' clever twist on this term in his sort of rhetorical film criticism work, Projected Fears, right? Looking at horror cinema in the 20th century in the U.S. And Kendall Phillips presents what he calls resonant violation, which is a playful turn on convention and invention, in which he's examining how these horror texts are, they resonate within a culture, but also violate audience expectations. And so this is an important transition in this talk, because what I'm interested in is how genres are convergent and thus ultimately hold the potential for both stickiness and spreadability. If I can use that trio of terms that we relate to not only Henry Jenkins, his book Convergence Culture in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, but also the Spreadable Media book from Jenkins, as well as Sam Ford and Joshua Green. All right, and so we're interested in the convergent model that genre presents us. Genre as a taxonomy of rules and organizational structures, as John Frau would suggest. And so reading genre as convergent can be a helpful way to do that. However, genre is also slippery. And an example that comes to mind is perhaps the film industry rating system, which there was a different model adopted for television, right? And so we can kind of see how these rating systems both create an organizational structure to kind of project a clarity, perhaps just an industry confidence in a product, but they're also slippery in a way, right? Because the institutions involved are often looking for ways to circumvent the meaning of a rating or the usage of a rating system, right? Whether they're contesting a result or writing the line of what constitutes a certain standard for a product. And so we see genre as slippery throughout its theoretical history. Aristotle was theorizing about genre in the dawn of literary history, right? And the examination of how texts could be organized according to their functions. When we look at the theory, right, genre as theory, there is this slippery terrain of genre mixers. In this essay, I examine a couple of genre mixers that are not theorists so much as filmmakers. Specifically, I take a short look at directors like Ridley Scott and John Carpenter that utilize genre mixing in the storytelling, in the narrative fashion. And what are they doing in that usage of genre mixing, but reorganizing both the familiar as well as the foreign parts to make successful features like Alien, 1979 from Ridley Scott, where he's combining elements of horror alongside elements of science fiction to present something new, but yet also paying homage to some of the science fiction or literary tropes that set the stage for what we consider a unique work in Alien. Well, John Carpenter does similar work in 1981's Escape from New York. Carpenter is borrowing from a combination of science fiction, the Western, but also a kind of dystopian future element. And so when you look at something like Escape from New York or Alien, you have the emergence of a subgenre of science fiction, a subgenre referred to or theorized by Alvin Toffler in his work Future Shock. Movies or films that play into concerns and fears about the real life or real-ish potentialities of our futures. And so these texts, these directors, they are able to adhere to both departures and homages in conversation with one another, not unlike George Miller does in Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, another Future Shock film. And in this feature, we have essentially a genre mixture of texts the screenplay combined two ideas. One borrowed from a literary work, a British novel that was post-apocalyptic in nature, and then the other was more of a screenwriter's approach to how do we create a sequel to this popular Mad Max franchise. And this was woven together, and I believe the end result is evident on screen, and even by film's end, in that climactic third act, director Miller and his other co-director, he stages the action in such a way that we get in what some could consider an anticlimax, right? A reversal of what the audience would come to expect or anticipate from such a feature. And so departures and homages are ways to think about genre in a film context. But let's think about it again in an academic theorizing manner. And I've already mentioned Kendall Phillips and the clever way in which he is both paying homage to genre theory while departing in new directions with resonant violation. That's just a theoretical example. But we can even see academics theorizing as generic in form when we think about the distinction between high theory versus low theory, or maybe the extreme collision of these when you think about something like postmodern critical theory, right? What do we have there? We have genre admixing. And so ultimately, the argument here becomes a pedagogical one and a scholarly one. It's that genre offers value for communication. And I would distinguish this as it offers value in the form of ways of teaching students about subdisciplines of research, maybe scholarly groups and groupings, our taxonomies within the discipline itself. But we can also think about the categorization of curriculum. Communication is not one of the largest fields nationwide in the arts, but it's among those with the most forward-leaning potential. And the question thus becomes, are we reaching it? Are we elevating ourselves to that need, that opportunity? Because the alternative will result in receding returns. All right, and so we can think about the categorization of something like curriculum or curriculum design, the way we market our discipline, not merely inside, right? Which we very much do well at conferences and along those lines, but how are we extending those on our own campuses and with new student clientele that we engage with? And also we can think about maybe how the genre rules apply to the history of the field and what those connections might be. Future works, future ways to think ahead. Ultimately, I'm interested in genre's exploding uses for mass communication. I'm unique, or have I'm privileged enough to be in a program that is communication based, but interested in emphasizing mass communication, media studies among our tiers of emphasis. And so we can think about the uses for mass communication. Genre can extend into our research, our data collection, maybe even our professional development. And certainly the synergistic way that many media studies programs are now locking arms with outside parties interested in the services that we can provide and the ways that our students can, if they're not moving on within higher education, can seek opportunities outside of it. And so finally, I would close with offering this suggestion that genre represents a multicultural mode of social persuasion. And I see this occurring in the following tiers. In media practices, I see genre as a multimodal mode of social persuasion. I see this among our most riveting marketing campaigns. I think that extends into social media campaigns and how we're adopting strategies daily. Social media campaigns can be distinct from, but also include ad campaigns. Traditional ad strategies would benefit from the inclusion of conversations about genre. As we're developing future content creators, industry, dirty word, but other professional writers and developers of ideas, right, in the idea and information age, respectively. And finally, brand management. All right, and so that is a projected future look at ways we can embrace genre conversations in academic settings and as pedagogical tools to help develop not only the theoretical understandings that our students gain and perhaps the intellectual conversations that we share within the scholarly communities, but also as a bridge to recognize and take advantage of the future opportunities that are present now. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time. And again, I look forward to examining each of the peer presentations on our Media Ecologies division panel, Intersections, Divides, and Interpretations for the National Communication Association convention. Thank you.